Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, the co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. Well, yesterday, the Speaker of the House gave a major speech in Washington to some business people, assuring everybody that tax reform is coming. He practically guaranteed it will occur this year in 2017. Things will move smoothly. The Democrats will roll over and Trump will do exactly what the House wants. But then again, it's reform, and there's lots of reform. There's always reform, and we sort of use the word reform as a cliche of watching, beware. But my guess is, after looking at this, there's a few things in here we'd probably support, a few things we'd advise people to be cautious. But overall, what do you think about getting real reform where in 6 months or a year from now, you're going to say, wow, I'm so happy that now I have a lot more cash in my wallet because I don't have to pay as much taxes.
Well, as you would say, they're not talking about shrinking the size of government at all, just about different ways of collecting the money.
There you go. But I listened to Paul's speech yesterday and read his speech carefully, and because tax is a big issue, that's what we have to pay for civilized government, it has been said. But sometimes I think the opposite is true. The more we pay, the less civilized our government becomes, and the less it protects our liberties. But the bill itself has a couple things that I would like to see done, and they are, first, the inheritance tax, would be eliminated. I don't think that doesn't collect a lot of taxes, but I don't think they're going to do that because this is good symbolism to punish the rich, and they don't collect that much revenues, but they should just do away with it because the principle is so bad. Why do we have to tax people who paid money, saved their money, build a business, and then to pass it on? It's destruction of capital. And I think, some Republicans in the House recognize that and they'd get rid of it. I just think the odds of that aren't very good.
Yeah, and the other thing that apparently is a real sticking point is this whole idea of a border adjustment provision in the taxes. And to be honest, I don't understand it as well as you, so I was going to ask you maybe if you can explain what is it about and what's the debate about?
Well, generally speaking, I've always thought of border taxes as being import taxes and a tariff. But recently, in this administration, they talked about border taxes, taxing things going out and taxes and things coming in. But why in the world why would you need either one? But why would you need the one to tax goods going out? And it was for retaliation and manipulation. So, but they're not talking about that as much. But Trump still talks about import taxes. But the House and Paul Ryan has a good position on this. They generally criticize import taxes, and that's good. So how is this handled politically? What will happen? Trump has been very outspoken in the campaign, and we criticize it all the time. 30% import tax
China.
on everything. China punish the Chinese. Well, China's Trump's best friend now, and he's playing up to him. So that's not going to happen. But if they don't have a significant increase in tariffs for raising revenues, how will Trump save face? He generally gets out in the middle someplace like that. Yes, I wanted it, but things are different now. But I would think he's going to get something token that doesn't have a lot of meaning and drift away from it. But fortunately, I don't think they're going to raise a lot of tariffs. I'm hoping they have enough sense on this. But when it comes to solving the problem, that's the real thing, because there's some the whole principle that they're following is they're obligated to follow revenue neutral, which is sinful. That means that if I cut your taxes, you have to raise them on me to make up for it. And that's what they're talking about. And one of the ways they're going to raise taxes on some individuals is eliminate deductions on certain items, and that will allow them to have the money to give a tax cut to everybody else. But I think that's a little bit pie in the sky dreaming.
Sounds like a sleight of hand. And the other thing you mentioned before we started is that the big thing is closing loopholes. If they can close the loopholes, they'll get more money.
Yeah, and that may be true, but that's a tax increase. So there are tax increases built into this. But there's I keep emphasizing the fact that they ought to be talking about one thing, and that is spending. Because once they spend the money, it's a tax. They have to get it somewhere. They have to either get direct taxation, they have to borrow the money, they have to inflate, print the money, or whatever. So everything is a tax. But if they raise taxes like this, it undermines everything they're trying to do, and that is lower taxes. But they won't talk about spending. So what would your expectations from this discussion so far be? That we're going to have less revenues, we're going to have tax cuts. Maybe it'll be tougher for the military-industrial complex to get their budgets passed. What do you think the odds are on that happening?
Well, I'm afraid that is not going to be the case. In fact, the Republicans in the House Budget Committee are battling right now over the defense spending, military spending for next year, for fiscal year 2018. Trump wanted, of course, $54 billion in additional military spending, but House Republicans, or at least a faction of House Republicans, say that's nowhere near enough. Senator McCain, wants an additional $37 billion over Trump's $54 billion. So the increase to the military is likely to be very high. The question is, where will it come from? Trump's already slashed food stamps and other domestic programs in his budget to pay for this $54 billion. What else is going to be slashed to prop up the U.S. empire?
No, I think they'll continue to get their money regardless. Debts don't matter really to most people in Washington. They might not say it, but if they did matter, we wouldn't have $20 trillion in debt and continue to grow in spite of our productivity going down. Yet the debt continues to grow and the money supply continues to grow.
But they're keeping us safe.
Yeah, there you go. But the other trick they play in this budget, it's been maintained, it's been around for a long time, and I think Republicans are a little more guilty of this. I think the supply-siders like this. Is if you cut the rates and the companies do better, which they would, and it will give help to the companies. They will be more productive, they will earn more money, and they will send more revenues to the government. And that may or may not happen on the short run or whatever, but the goal would be that you estimate dynamic scoring. If we cut taxes $10 billion, next year we're going to get $20 billion of extra revenues, and it'll pay for it. So they work that into the calculation, so therefore they would argue, well, this fits the requirement of revenue neutral. We're going to get the revenues, but it's going to be because lower taxes is going to energize the economy. And there's a little temptation to think along those terms, but it emphasizes the fact that they have no goal to really cut back taxes and really cut back spending, because generally it doesn't pan out as well as they expect. It's just a gimmick. So they do this just to get things passed, which is okay. But most of the time they never get the revenues that they think they're going to get by dynamic scoring. But it's more a gimmick than anything else, and yet that is calculated in here. It complicates things. I keep thinking, a little bit about how am I going to analyze this if I was sitting once again with responsibility of voting. Well, I'd have to do some arithmetic, but it's almost impossible to figure out that arithmetic about, they say they're going to get $20 billion for $20 billion more income by spending 10, but that shouldn't be the goal. If they do get new revenues, well, that is good. That means we can cut more spending, and that would be fine. If you can cut it, and this happens, this would be a good transition. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that is the goal. I think that is an accounting gimmick to try to get things passed, and even up front, they might realize that the whole program is going to increase the indebtedness, of the whole country.
It sounds like a real philosophical difference. Should government be smaller, or should we just get enough money to pay its bills? And
that's the whole thing, and it challenges foreign policy. And the Republicans aren't going to challenge foreign policy. They want an extra $1 trillion there, and the Democrats like the infrastructure more than Republicans. Well, Republicans like that too. I mean, it's locked in place. But there's a foundation called the Tax Foundation, and the president released something to support this Republican position. And they come up with a number. It's very interesting how good they are at these numbers. It will create 1.7 million new full-time jobs.
Huh.
I couldn't find out whether it's going to be in 6 months, 1 year, or 20 years. But this tax thing, if it were true tax return reform, lower taxes, smaller government and all, I would say, yes, it would produce jobs. But this is another thing to say, well, let's get this thing passed, and this will stir up the economy. But I think sometimes the things that look good on the surface get passed, and the other things get waylaid. They're not going to get rid of the inheritance tax, for instance.
We were talking before, and this is slightly unrelated. It's tangentially related, but tomorrow the House is expected to reauthorize the Carl Perkins Career and Technical Education Act. We talk about jobs, and this is the federal subsidies to help people study. It used to be called vocational, but that's old-fashioned now. It's technical and career skills. But it's interesting. You look. This is a reauthorization of the bill from 2006. But actually, when you look back, it began in 1984. So they've been subsidizing this for a long time. You'd think that they would have the kinds of jobs they need from this now. It just keeps going.
See, this emphasizes the principle of economic planning, that we need government to tell individuals and people and companies how and when to train, how much money to invest in training. I think corporations are very much involved in training. We live here in a community that Dow Chemical is prevalent, and they have lots of interest in getting people trained without the federal government doing it. I'm sure there's always government money involved and all. Nothing is so pure. But no, I think local communities and I think business people would train people. Apprenticeships, that used to be it. That's how you learn how to be a plumber or a welder. You go in and you work for small wages, and you work hard and you learn, and then you move up the ladder. But that's not the case. You have to have a government program. Then you have to find the people who need the jobs, and they want to do job placement. Then they have to make sure that there's a balance, so there's no hint of discrimination. If you're going to do welders, you have to have half of them should be women and half men. This sort of thing. It gets into all types of regulation instead of having the confidence that the market works. In our early history, they didn't have that in the Industrial Revolution, and we had a lot of immigrants coming over. It was up to them. My family came from Germany, but they went to Pittsburgh, and even I remembered some of my relatives still working in the steel mills, and still there are still a couple of steel mills, but they came there and they learned something, but we didn't need the government to do that. This is expanding this notion of economic planning, that business people in the market can't decide how to get people trained and let people make up their minds on what to do, which means that there would be a challenge to the educational system. There's probably a lot less people should be trying to get a fancy college degree that trains them for nothing. So that's one program that I certainly disagree with.
Sounds like a lot of more jobs for government workers.
Right. Now, there are other ways that they tax us. I like to use the broad term of taxation, spending as a tax. But there's another way of paying for that, and that, of course, is the inflation tax. And that means that people pay more for their goods and services because prices go up because they print the money to pay the bills. That is a tax, and it's very, very regressive. But I think most taxes are regressive. Anything that pushes the cost of doing business has to be passed on if they have to make a profit. So it's passed on and it becomes very regressive. So if you put some do-good regulations on business that really so many are unnecessary and don't fulfill the role they're intended, the costs go up and they have to pass that along. That is regressive. Now, do you think Bernie Sanders understands that? You know, that the more you pretend you're punishing those successful business people, the more they're punishing the people they're trying to help, and then they come up short. So the answer for the socialists is, well, we need to be more efficient in our management of the economy. We need to forcibly take more money from the productive effort and physically transfer it to the people that we created and made them homeless and put them out of work and distort the whole economy. So the issue of taxation, has been around for a long time. Of course, I frequently refer to my first speech ever given in politics, and although my position is getting rid of the 16th Amendment and the income tax, because that represents ownership of one's body and energy, and that means the government gives us permission to keep a certain percentage. But my suggestion initially was, there's such a mess, the complexity, and the Republicans touched on this yesterday, but if you're going to go with a flat tax, which has some definitely shortcomings, but limit it to 10%, no more than 10% ever that an individual should ever have to pay from their income. An absolute. Of course, there will never be absolutes. If they can put 10% and allow you to keep 90%, they can keep 12% and let you keep 88%. And that's what happened. That's what happened to the income tax. It started out very, very low, a couple percentage points on the very wealthy, and look at the monstrosity we have now, and look at the tricks they play. And still, it's a regressive tax. Ultimately, it destroys the economy, and that's why there's a lot of significant unemployment, even though that's total denial, because there's 100 million people who are out of the workforce, so we don't count them, so things are okay, and we don't worry about the homeless, which are in terms of tens of thousands in our big cities that are sleeping on the streets. It's a consequence of big government taxation, this micromanaging of the economy. So that's the problem that this does not deal with. I think this program actually continues the progress. Do you have a closing statement for us today, Daniel, about what your attitude is about taxes? And I warned you before the show, do not call for higher taxes or we will have a problem.
No, I think it's the same old thing we talk about. We talk about the Patriot Act and other things. Whenever you see the word reform, you got to read the fine print.
There you go. And there's a lot of fine print, 70,000 pages of the IRS code. Who reads the code? They can get anybody, anytime, and convict them. And the tragedy in this country is you're guilty until proven innocent. And that is where the real problem is that the government is totally out of control. Laws are written by the executive branch and by the judicial branch. And then nobody monitors it. The Congress just reneges on their responsibility. They talk about it and there's tokenism, but no. Most laws and regulations are written outside of the Congress. They give open-ended permission, and then the writing of the regulations is up to the individuals that don't have any limitations, even if the law did not give them the responsibility to write certain regulation. So it's the principle of big government that we're facing. If you're talking about taxes, you're talking about funding for too many wars, too much overseas spending, too much interference, the welfare state. That is the problem, and as long as we have that system, there will always be sinister ways of trying to finance it, usually with deficits and taxes. That is bad, and we have to challenge that. I think we're fortunate to know that there is an alternative that can be found in free market economics and defending the principles of liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.